The Gerblin's been swinging a hot bat of late, 7 for his last 15. Here's the 2-1. Deep to left. That ball is gone. The crowd loves it. I've never heard this much generic goblin noise.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Welcome back, gang! Today's game was filmed back in New Jersey before I left for Montreal, and it features Trevor playing his Vial and Ikra deck, keeping Damnation, Spire Garden, Sakura Tribe Elder, Tormenting Voice, Forest, Arachnogenesis, and Reiterate. Amadeus, who's new to the channel, is playing his Varina deck, and keeps a Diregraph Colossus, an Island, a Plains, Temple of Silence, Cyclonic Rift, Grimgrin, and Shepherd of Rot. Matt is playing his Seizan Perverter of Truth deck, and keeps Jet Medallion, Dark Deal, Master of the Feast, Ghost Quarter, and 3 Swamps. Lastly, Mike is taking his Kaseto deck out again, and keeps a Reflecting Pool, a Forest, See the Unwritten, Tempt with Discovery, Skyshroud Claim, Rashmi Eternity's Crafter, and Prowler's Helm. Mike wins the die roll, and he starts us off. Mike plays a Forest, and he passes. Amadeus plays a Temple of Silence, scrying 1 and keeping it on top. Matt plays a Swamp and passes to Trevor. Trevor plays a Spire Garden, which comes in untapped, and he passes. Mike plays a Reflecting Pool and taps out to cast a Prowler's Helm. Amadeus plays an Island, and he casts his Shepherd of Rot. Matt plays a Swamp and drops Jet Medallion. Trevor plays a Forest, and he casts a Sakura Tribe Elder. Mike plays a Halimar Depths and rearranges the top 3 cards from his library before passing. Amadeus plays a Plains, and he casts a Diregraph Colossus. Matt plays a Swamp, and he casts a Thematic Compass. At the end of Matt's turn, Trevor sacrifices his Sakura Tribe Elder to go and find a basic Swamp. Trevor casts a Tormenting Voice, discarding Wretched Confluence, and he draws 2. He plays a Cinder Glade as his land for turn, and he passes. Mike plays a Rogue's Passage and casts Tempt with Discovery. In what I can only imagine is a Bizarro World scenario, everyone agrees to take the land. This has everyone going to their respective libraries to find one, while Mike grabs 4 lands. Amadeus also taps his Shepherd of Rot at the end of turn to deal 2 damage to everyone at the table. Amadeus casts Varina in his main phase, but forgets his Colossus trigger. Moving to combat, he swings the Colossus and the Shepherd at Mike, which triggers Varina's ability, having Amadeus gain 2 life, then draw 2 cards, and then discard 2 cards. Matt plays a Swamp, and he activates Cabal Coffers, which he got to go find thanks to Mike. He casts Seizan, and then drops a Howling Mine once his commander resolves. Trevor loses 2 life, and draws 3 extra cards for his turn, plus the draw for turn. He plays a Smoldering Marsh as his land for turn, and he brings out Vial Smasher before passing to Mike. Mike also loses 2 life, and then draws 3 extra cards for his turn. He plays a tapped Temple of Mystery, scrying 1 and bottoming it before casting Rashmi. Mike then gears up Rashmi with the Helm, and he passes. At the end of Mike's turn, Trevor targets Varina with the Red Elemental Blast, and Trevor rolls to see who Vial will hit before the spell resolves, and Mike takes 1, while Varina gets destroyed. Amadeus also loses 2 and draws 3 extra cards. He plays a Plains as his land for turn, and he pays 5 to cast Grimgrin. He remembers his Diregraph Colossus trigger this time, and puts a tapped zombie onto the field. He then has to discard at the end of turn, and he passes to Matt. Matt loses 2 and draws 3 extra cards, playing a Reliquary Tower as his land for turn. He activates the Compass to go and find a Swamp, and he puts it to his hand. He then passes to Trevor. Trevor loses 2 life and draws 4 total cards for his turn, and he plays a Marsh Flats as his land for turn, and casts Volcanic Vision in his main phase, targeting his Wretched Confluence. He rolls for the Vial Smasher trigger, and Mike takes 7. With the spell in the stack, Amadeus taps his Shepherd to deal 4 to the table, and then sacrifices all of his zombies to Grimgrin, giving the legendary zombie 3+1/+1 counters and untapping him. The spell resolves and wipes the board, and Trevor passes to Mike. Mike plays a Thornwood Falls as a land for turn, gaining 1 life. We then see a Colonian Hydra from Mike, and he casts a Canopy Cover onto it. Amadeus draws 2 and plays a Swamp for his land for turn, and he plays a Wayward Serpent in his main phase. He moves to combat and swings Grimgrin at Trevor. Amadeus uses the Grimgrin's on attack trigger to blow up Vial Smasher, and Trevor then takes 9. In his second main phase, Amadeus casts Zombie Infestation and passes. Matt plays a Swamp for turn and activates his coffers to cast Decree of Pain. Trevor corrects his minor misplay by making sure that Volcanic Visions is exiled, and Matt draws 3 cards as 3 creatures die. Matt then passes turn, and his compass flips at the end of turn to become Spires of Orazca. Trevor plays a Stomping Ground and takes 2 to have it come in untapped. He then casts a Dark Petition, which has its Spell Mastery clause met. This isn't enough for Trevor, and he copies the tutor with Reiterate. This means he gets to go and find 2 cards and gains 6 black mana. Trevor then uses 4 of the floating black to cast Primal Amulet, and then only needs to pay 1 of the remaining 2 floating black mana to cast a Demonic Tutor, going for another card and putting a counter on the amulet. Mike plays a forest for his turn, and he casts Cultivate in his main phase. Before he goes to search, he decides to save himself some time, and Mike also resolves the Skyshroud claim to go and find 3 lands for the field and 1 for his hand, and pass his turn. Amadeus plays a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and he casts Rooftop Storm. He then casts a Corpse Connoisseur for free, and he goes and puts Consecrated Sphinx into his graveyard. With nothing else, Amadeus then passes to Matt. Matt plays a Swamp for his turn, and activates his coffer to help pay for Cage's Sun, which he has named Black as it comes in. Matt then brings out Seizan again, and he casts a Bloodchief's Ascension. Matt then passes, but at the end of turn, Amadeus exiles Seizan with Path to Exile, letting Matt go and find a swamp. Trevor plays a Command Tower as land for turn, and needs only to pay 1 for Farseek, putting his second counter onto the amulet, and going to find a tapped Blood Crypt. We then see Trevor's favorite green card, Seasons Past, which has another counter put onto the amulet, and Trevor brings back Demonic Tutor, Reiterate, Harmonize, Red Elemental Blast, and Dark Petition. Trevor then recasts the Demonic Tutor, which puts the final counter onto his amulet, and he flips it to reveal Primal Wellspring. He then goes and finds a card, and he moves to his end step, discarding down to 7. Mike plays an island, and he plays an Engulfing Slagworm. He then casts a See the Unwritten, with Ferocious enabled, and Mike keeps a Void Winnower and a Spearbreaker Behemoth. He then bins the rest of the cards, and passes. At the end of turn, Trevor casts his recently returned Red Elemental Blast to blow up Amadeus' Rooftop Storm. Amadeus plays a Swamp for his turn, and he brings out the Scarab God. Moving to combat, he swings a Corpse Connoisseur at Trevor for 2, and passes to Matt. Matt casts a Dark Dealings in his main phase, and Trevor isn't a huge fan of this, having just tutored several times. They all then draw as many cards as they had -1, once it resolves. Matt then casts an Expedition map, and he activates his Cabal Coffers to pay for Seizan once more. We then see a Magus of the Coffers because more coffers is best coffers, and he passes turn. Trevor loses 2 on his upkeep, and he draws 4 cards before moving to his main phase. He plays a Bojuka Boggs as land for turn, and hits Amadeus' graveyard. He then casts an Exsanguinate where X is 9 to get around the Void Winnower, and having paid into it with Primal Wellspring, he gets a copy of it as well. This has Trevor draining each of his opponents twice for 9, and he gains a total of 54 life. Trevor then passes, and at the end of turn, Matt puts a counter onto his Ascension. Mike draws 4 cards and loses 2 life, his life total hovering at a dangerously low point. He casts a Stolen Identity, making a copy of the Void Winnower, and he ciphers the spell onto the original copy. Mike then casts Aqueous Form onto the Winnower as well, and he moves to combat. He swings both the Winnower and the Slagworm at Amadeus, and Amadeus blocks the Slagworm with the Scarab God, which triggers the Slagworm's ability to destroy the Scarab God and gives Mike 5 life. Amadeus then takes 11, and Mike gets to copy the Stolen Identity again for free, and this time makes a copy of the Slagworm. Mike then puts the Prowler Helm onto the new Slagworm token, and he passes. At the end of turn, Matt puts another counter onto his Ascension. Amadeus loses 2 life and draws 4 cards, and he plays a Cabal Coffers in his main phase as a land for turn. We then see Amadeus tapping out to cast Dread Summons where X is 13. Everyone mills 13 cards, and then adds up how many creatures were binned. The guys tally it up, and Amadeus gains 17 tapped zombie tokens. And with nothing else, Amadeus passes while Matt puts a counter onto his Ascension. Matt loses 2 life and draws 4 cards like everyone else, and activates his Cabal Coffers to help pay for Black Sun Zenith where X is 9. This wipes the board, and Mike gets drained for 6 as 3 cards go to his graveyard, dropping to 1. Not to worry though, as he's joined by Amadeus thanks to his Corpse Connoisseur going to his graveyard. Matt also shuffles the Black Sun Zenith into his library, and he then passes turn, putting another counter onto the Ascension. Trevor draws 2 for his turn because of Howling Mine, and he plays a Reliquary as his land for turn. He then overloads a Vandal Blast, and Matt sacrifices his Expedition map to go and find Buried Ruin while the spell's on the stack. Matt unfortunately misses the Bloodchief trigger that could potentially kill Mike with the Prowler's Helm getting destroyed, and Trevor then casts Worst Fear with the Primal Wellspring to take Amadeus and Matt's next turns, before exiling the sorcery. Mike plays a Colony Garden, and he gains a 0/1 plant token. He then casts a Soul Ring, and then a Thought Vessel. Mike then drops Trigon Predator, and he then casts a Pathrazer of Ulamog before passing turn. Trevor starts Amadeus' turn, and he plays an Esper Panorama as his land for turn. Trevor then cracks it, and with the land going to the graveyard, Amadeus gets drained for 2 because of the Bloodchief Ascension, and he dies. Trevor draws for Matt's turn, and he casts Mutilate, and Mike dies to the first Bloodchief's Attention trigger as his creatures die. Trevor then casts a Font of Mythos, and he follows up with Ill-Gotten Gains. Trevor chooses to return nothing for Matt, and returns Rude Awakening to his hand, with Reiterate and Exsanguinate. He also chooses not to use the Bloodchief Ascension triggers when they discard their hands, and then with nothing else, Trevor passes to himself. Trevor draws 3 for his turn, and he taps out to cast Rude Awakening and Reiterate with the buyback to copy the spell. This essentially gives him infinite mana, with many of it being from the Wellspring. He then dumps all of that mana into an arbitrarily large Exsanguinate, which also gets copied an arbitrarily large number of times to win the game. Game review time. So, unfortunately, I don't think this game showcased the other decks as well as it did Trevor's. Varina was certainly interesting. I like the fact that she draws and gives you a discard outlet in the same go, but unfortunately she really wasn't on the field for very long. I also think Amadeus was a bit ambitious, casting Rooftop Storm and only casting 1 zombie for free, and then it got blown up without any real benefit to him. Matt's Group Slug Seizan deck is pretty cool, but unfortunately he didn't get any of his punishing cards, and the only thing that he was doing was dealing slight amounts of damage on everyone's draw step, while giving them ample fuel. I think if we'd seen something like Painful Quandary or Underworld Connections, this game might have gone differently. I'm starting to get a better idea of what Mike's Kaseto deck wants to do, and it seems like it wants to play giant creatures and then make them very hard to deal with and start smashing face. I'm all for the smashy, but unfortunately he didn't have any counterspells or way to save his creatures from board wipes and removal spells. This put him at a bit of a disadvantage, since Trevor and Matt basically were playing control decks and ran very few creatures, so board wipes didn't hurt them, and Amadeus' graveyard was basically an extension of his hand, so he was able to recur a lot of creatures. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.